Hey everyone, if we're meeting for the first time, my name is Vojchehoske and welcome to Nebraska Landlords YouTube channel, where my mission is simple. That's to enhance the landlord-tenant relationship. Today is Q&A Saturday. That's where I take all the questions, the calls, the emails, the text messages that I get from landlords and tenants throughout the week, and I answer them on a video. I pick out the best ones, the ones that have the best learning content to them, and put them on a video. The first one I want to talk about today is LB 892, the wholesaling law that passed recently. I know I've already done a couple other videos on this, but I get a lot of questions about, well, this is no big deal because we can do double closings, right? And the answer is wrong. You cannot. Well, you can do double closings, but the intent, or the way that the statute is structured, it is not going to matter. You see, the law says that you have to be a licensed agent or use a licensed agent to market your equitable interest in a contract. So, whether you have equitable interest and you are going to assign it to somebody or do a double closing, either way, you're going to have to market that equitable interest to someone, which under Nebraska license law does include verbalization. So if you go to somebody and say, hey, I got a purchase agreement on a house over here, if you want to buy it and let me know, that is a form of marketing. There is no loopholes here, no way around it. If you're going to market your equitable interest, you're going to have to get licensed or use a licensed professional. That is just the bottom line. All right, so I had a couple of great questions this week that I thought I would bring before you. I got an email from a tenant this past week that was livid at their landlord because the landlord needs to do maintenance in that apartment or his apartment, and he feels that he has an absolute right to be in that apartment while the maintenance is going on. He reached out to me, wanted to know what the law says, and this is a very common question that I get, so I thought I would address it. Number one, the answer is located in Nebraska Revised Statute 76-14-23 that deals with access, landlord access to your apartment or your rental unit, no matter if it's an apartment or a single family home or duplex, etc. So what are the requirements here? Well, number one, to be the bearer of bad news for that tenant, you don't have a say, not according to the landlord-tenant statute. What does the statute require? Number one, the statute allows for the landlord or their authorized representative, such as a maintenance person, to enter that property to do a couple of things. Number one, they're allowed to give you notice and enter the property to show your property to contractors potentially for work that may need to be done, to perform maintenance, to perform inspections. It's very common for landlords and managers to do annual inspections on the property, and also to show the property to prospective future tenants or prospective future purchasers. That's part one. Part two, they must give you a 24-hour notice. Now, a couple of things here. First of all, this law changed a couple of years ago. It used to be 1 day notice. And by the way, for those of you that are using my ultimate lease agreement, in paragraph 14, you need to update that to reword it from 1 day notice to 24-hour notice. So please take a look at your lease if you're using that. But you have to give the tenant a 24-hour notice, and entrance into that dwelling must be at reasonable times. Now, typically, I consider reasonable times between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Okay? There are a couple of other requirements that notice must include. 24-hour notice, reasonable time, and that notice must give the tenant an approximate time or time frame in which someone is going to be entering their dwelling. Most common that I see is 2-hour increments, between noon and 2 p.m. And also a very brief description of the reason they are entering, to perform maintenance on this item or to show it to a prospective tenant or whatever the case may be. Those are the requirements under the Nebraska Landlord-Tenant Statute. That's it. A tenant does not have the legal right to say, do not enter my property unless I am there. So just to point that out there. Second question that I got, and this one here is a doozy that's probably going to land this landlord in, if there's a complaint filed, this landlord's going to pay dearly. So I got a call from a gentleman that actually is he's a real estate agent trying to help out a person that's being abused by a landlord. I'm just going to say it. The landlord's wrong here. So here is the synopsis. The tenant gets sick, and the tenant ends up partially paralyzed. And so the tenant's up to date on their rent. They're a good tenant. The tenant reaches out to the landlord and says, hey, we want to install grab bars in the bathroom, the bathtub, the shower area where the toilet is. We want to install grab bars. The landlord says no. Not only does the landlord say no, then the next day they turn around and give him a 30-day notice to vacate because they are on a month-to-month lease agreement. Oh. So they reached out and was like, is there anything I could do? And I said, yes, absolutely. Number one is their request is the tenant's request is what's called a reasonable accommodation request under the Fair Housing Act. Now, there are times when a landlord or manager can say no to a reasonable modification request or a reasonable accommodation request if the request is unreasonable. This is not unreasonable by any stretch of the imagination, okay? The tenant was willing to have a licensed contractor go in and do it, so on and so forth. There was absolutely no reason why the landlord should have said no, other than they just didn't want to allow it. So they asked me if there's any recourse, and the answer is absolutely yes. I would have a conversation with that landlord and say, if you do not allow this, then I'm going to file a fair housing complaint and talk to the Fair Housing Center of Nebraska and Iowa, and they can assist you with that. The other thing I would suggest before you call fair housing, though, is have the conversation and the threat with the landlord and give them my information. Have the landlord or owner call me, and I will talk to them, because that's the right thing to do here. The landlord should allow this, and within the law, the tenant is legally entitled here. If this ends up going to a fair housing complaint, the landlord is going to get toasted. So prepare for some heavy rolls on this. These situations just firmly illustrate my opinion that either know the business inside and out, know what you're doing as a landlord, you are running a professional business, or turn it over to a property management company that can. And I got a great one. They're Performance Property Management. They are the best in the business. If you're just sick and tired of all the regulation that you have to comply with, if you're sick and tired of dealing with tenants and showings and collecting rents and all of that, then turn it over to an awesome property management company, Performance Property Management. I'm going to leave their contact information right here. Give John a call. He'll treat you like gold, I promise you. That's all I got. If you want to stay informed, click this video right here. Don't forget to subscribe, little circle right here. Comments and questions down below. See you all in the next video.